In the powerhouse world of gleaming glass towers and million-dollar deals, Nate Brooks is a man wrapped in steel, unyielding, unapproachable, and utterly alone. With every calculated move and ruthless decision, he's built an empire that commands respect and fear across continents. Yet behind the tailored suits and perfectly curated public image, a restless emptiness lingers, a void no amount of success can fill. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Olivia Hart moves through her unremarkable days with quiet grace. A woman of simple pleasures and steadfast dreams, she finds joy in the little things that many overlook, the warmth of a handwritten letter, the hum of community, the laughter shared over spilled coffee. In a world that measures worth by wealth and influence, she is invisible, a face in the crowd, a life untouched by glamour or riches. Fate, however, has no interest in the invisible or the untouchable. When their worlds collide in the most unexpected way, it's as if the universe has hit pause, to unravel every pretense, every guarded secret. For the first time, Nate Brooks sees beyond the veneer of success and power. He sees something real, something raw, the ordinary girl who shines with an extraordinary light. What begins as a chance encounter slowly shifts, turning the pages of a story neither one expected to live, a CEO's journey not toward conquest, but toward a love that defies every rule he's ever known. And Ellie? She's about to discover that sometimes, it's the ordinary who holds the power to change everything. The city wakes before dawn, its skyline a jagged silhouette against the rising sun. For most, it's just another morning, coffee brewing, trains screeching, footsteps echoing on sidewalks. But for two people, miles apart, today is the quiet beginning of everything. Nathaniel Brooks, and Olivia Hart. Nate Brooks had the kind of life most men envied, sleek suits tailored to perfection, a corner office overlooking the city, his name etched in gold on the side of a towering skyscraper. The young CEO everyone whispered about in boardrooms and glossy magazines. But if you looked past the sharp jawline and the confidence, you'd notice the shadows under his eyes. The way his hands sometimes clenched into fists when no one was looking. The way silence in his penthouse apartment felt heavier than any meeting. Nate was brilliant, yes. But brilliant came with a price. The late nights, the betrayals, the expectations. And the secret grief he carried for a father he lost too young. The same father whose voice he still heard sometimes, reminding him that power without peace meant nothing. To the world, Nate was unstoppable. But inside? He was a man with cracks he didn't know how to mend. Meanwhile, across the city in a much smaller, humbler neighborhood, Olivia Hart was tying her hair back in the mirror of her tiny apartment. The walls were thin, the paint chipped, and the rent overdue. Yet Olivia moved with a kind of quiet resilience, the kind that doesn't demand attention but earns respect. Her mornings were filled with the sound of her younger sister Sophie's laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the ever-present worry of her father Henry's declining health. She was the glue that held her family together, working long shifts, taking side jobs, pushing her own dreams aside so theirs could survive. To her co-workers at Clara Jennings' firm, Olivia was reliable, the one who could handle impossible tasks with a smile. But behind that smile was exhaustion. A longing for something beyond bills, beyond responsibility, beyond surviving. She had no idea that her life was about to crash into a world of glass towers and ruthless power plays. And so, two people carried their burdens separately. Nate, the CEO with scars he refused to show. Olivia, the ordinary girl whose strength lay in what she endured. But fate has a strange way of pulling threads together. That morning, Nate stepped into his office to face Victor Hale, a board member with eyes as sharp as broken glass. Hale had been circling for months, waiting for an opening to strike at Nate's leadership. "Brooks," Hale said, with that cold smirk that made every conversation feel like a chess match. "You're losing touch with the people. The investors need reassurance. Perhaps someone with fewer distractions should take the reins." The jab wasn't just professional, it was personal. Everyone knew about Nate's recent sleepless nights, his distracted stares during meetings. And though he brushed it off with a controlled smile, Hale's words hit where they hurt. Meanwhile, Olivia hurried into her workplace, balancing files and a lukewarm cup of coffee. Clara Jennings, her boss, called out, "Hart. Big event tonight. I need extra hands for setup at the gala. You're in." Olivia nodded, though her heart sank. Another late night. Another moment stolen from her family. But she had no choice. Responsibility always outweighed desire. Here lies the contrast. One man fighting to keep control of an empire. One woman fighting simply to hold her world together. Neither knew that the gala Clara mentioned, the very event that Victor Hale would use to undermine Nate Brooks, would be the first thread tying their lives together. For now, though, Nate retreated into the solitude of his office, staring at his father's watch on his wrist, the only thing that reminded him of simpler times. And Olivia, hours away, leaned against the bus window, the city blurring past her as she whispered a promise to herself, just one more day. You can make it through one more day. The stage was set. Two souls walking different paths. One burdened by too much power, the other by too little. And in a city where chance meetings could alter destinies, both were about to find themselves standing on the edge of something neither expected, love, in its rawest, most inconvenient form. If you were Nate, bearing the weight of an empire, or Olivia, carrying the weight of a family, whose life would feel heavier to you? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The city never sleeps, but tonight it dressed itself in gold. The Carter Foundation Gala, an annual spectacle of champagne, chandeliers, and whispers behind jeweled masks. For some, it was a chance to flaunt wealth. For others, an opportunity to scheme. But for Nathaniel Brooks and Olivia Hart, it was fate in disguise. Nate arrived in silence. His black car glided to a stop before the grand hall, cameras flashing, reporters shouting his name. His jawline was sharp, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. To the world, he looked untouchable. Inside, though, his chest tightened. These events always left him restless. The spotlight didn't heal, it only burned deeper into his scars. Miles Anderson, his assistant, leaned close. Victor Hale is circling tonight. Keep your composure. Anne. Eleanor's already inside. Nate nodded. His father's watch pressed against his wrist. A reminder of duty. A reminder that appearances mattered, even when his soul felt hollow. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers spilled light over polished marble. Laughter echoed, violins hummed, and conversations swirled with ambition. Nate scanned the crowd, his eyes catching Victor Hale's smirk across the room. Their rivalry needed no words. This gala was another battlefield. Meanwhile, Olivia adjusted the tray in her hands. She wasn't a guest tonight, just staff. Clara Jennings had pulled her in last minute to help manage logistics. And so, while others glided in gowns worth fortunes, Olivia wore black slacks, a white blouse, and a borrowed badge. She tried to fade into the background, to keep her head down. But her eyes betrayed her. She couldn't help but glance at the spectacle around her, the glittering dresses, the endless wealth, the kind of world that felt galaxies away from her apartment back home. Amelia's words from earlier rang in her mind, "Don't let them intimidate you. Remember, you've got more heart than half the people in that room." And so, Olivia moved through the crowd, quiet, unnoticed, until the accident. It happened in a heartbeat. A flustered guest collided with her tray, sending champagne flutes tilting dangerously. Olivia caught most of them, but one glass slipped, shattering on the marble floor at the exact moment Nathaniel Brooks passed by. The sound silenced nearby conversations. All eyes turned. And Olivia froze, cheeks flushed, humiliation burning her skin. Then, she looked up. And he looked down. For one suspended moment, everything else vanished. His eyes, dark, guarded, heavy with something unsaid, locked with hers, wide, vulnerable, and unyielding. Neither spoke. Neither moved. But something shifted. It wasn't attraction in the shallow sense. It was recognition. As if both carried a secret ache only the other could understand. Victor Hale's mocking voice broke the silence. "Careful, Brooks. Seems even the help is clumsy around you." Laughter rippled through a few onlookers. Olivia's throat tightened, but before she could retreat, Nate's voice cut through the air, low, steady, defiant. "Accidents happen, Hale. Some of us don't need to tear others down to feel taller." A hush followed. Nate bent slightly, picking up a shard of glass, his gaze never leaving Olivia's. He handed it to a passing waiter, his tone gentler now. "Are you all right?" Olivia swallowed, nodding quickly. "Yes. I'm fine." But her voice betrayed her, it trembled, softer than she meant it to be. Nate gave the faintest nod, then turned back to the crowd. Yet something lingered. He didn't usually notice. Didn't usually care. But the image of her, nervous, resilient, holding her ground despite the humiliation, etched itself into his thoughts. And Olivia? She told herself it was nothing. Just a fleeting moment. But deep down, she knew she'd never forget the way he looked at her. Not with pity. Not with superiority. But with understanding. The night pressed on. Olivia returned to her duties, but her eyes kept betraying her, finding him in the crowd, surrounded by sharks in suits and gowns. And Nate, though engaged in conversation with investors and Eleanor Grant's polished charm, felt his focus fray. He didn't know her name. Didn't know her story. But he felt the weight of her presence. Victor Hale watched too. His sharp eyes noticed the subtle glance, the hesitation in Brooks' demeanor. And he filed it away. Weakness. Leverage. By the time the gala ended, Olivia was exhausted. She slipped out through the back, the cool night air kissing her flushed skin. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt unsettled. A question hummed in her chest. Why did one look from a stranger feel like it unraveled everything? And across the city skyline, in the back of his car, Nate leaned his head against the leather seat. For once, it wasn't Hale's schemes or Eleanor's words haunting him. It was the image of a girl with trembling hands, who met his gaze without flinching. The spark had been lit. Quiet, small, but undeniable. Have you ever locked eyes with someone, just for a second, and felt like they saw through everything you hide? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. Nathaniel Brooks had built his empire on silence. On walls so high, even he had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without the weight of them pressing down. But ever since Olivia Hart had walked into his glass kingdom, something inside him had shifted. One smile from her had been enough to remind him of the man he used to be, the boy his father once believed in before the scars, before the betrayals, before the boardroom battles turned his heart into stone. And now, after that night, after the words they couldn't take back, Nate felt the fracture. But he didn't want to. He couldn't want to. So, he resisted. Nate told himself she was a mistake. An inconvenience. A distraction that could destroy everything. He doubled his hours, buried himself in meetings, and surrounded himself with people who reminded him who he was supposed to be. Victor Hale, ruthless, ambitious, waiting for him to falter. Eleanor Grant, polished, professional, watching with quiet curiosity as if she could see straight through his facade. And Miles Anderson, his loyal assistant, the only one cautious enough to sense his unease. Every time Olivia's name appeared in his schedule, Nate told Miles to rearrange it. Push it back. Replace her with someone else. Distance. That was the cure. Or so he thought. Meanwhile, Olivia Hart was fighting a different war. She had seen it too, that flicker in Nate's eyes, the brief moment when the CEO of Brooks Enterprises wasn't untouchable. When he looked at her, not as an employee. Not as a nuisance. But as something else. And for one heartbeat, she had wanted it. But Olivia had lived her entire life grounded in reality. Bills on the table. A father, Henry Hart, who worked his body to the bone to provide for her and her sister. Sophie, young, curious, still dreaming that life could be bigger than the paycheck-to-paycheck grind. Olivia didn't have the luxury of fairy tales. So she told herself the same thing Nate did. It was nothing. It couldn't be anything. And the sooner she reminded herself of that, the safer she would be. Music rises slightly, a pulse of tension. But resistance doesn't live in silence. It echoes. Olivia's friend Amelia Ward noticed it first. "You're quieter," Amelia said one night over coffee. "Quieter, and distracted. Don't tell me this has something to do with tall, brooding, and impossible." Olivia laughed, but the sound was brittle. "You're imagining things." But Amelia never believed her. Because friends always see what we try hardest to hide. And Nate's own mirror was Ryan Matthews, his college friend, the only one who knew the truth about the demons Nate kept locked away. Ryan leaned across the private bar table one evening and said, "You've been different. Jittery." "You don't get jittery, Nate." "What's her name?" Nate didn't answer. He didn't have to. Ryan just smirked. "Careful. The higher you build your walls, the harder the fall when someone climbs over." But Nate refused to admit it. Not to Ryan. Not to himself. So he worked harder. Smiled sharper. Pretended longer. Then came the disruptors. Victoria Steele, the ex who had once thought she owned him, suddenly reappeared at every charity gala and board meeting. Her perfume lingering like smoke, her smile sharp as glass. "Funny," she said one night, slipping her arm through his at an event. "I thought you'd finally realized what you need. But maybe, you've been distracted." Nate's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Because silence was safer than truth. And then Jonathan Pierce, family friend turned investor, began whispering in his mother's ear. Margaret Brooks, elegant, grieving, still holding on to the ghost of David Brooks, her late husband, didn't know what to do when Jonathan said, "Nate needs stability. He needs someone of his world. He can't afford sentiment. Stability. Of his world. Not someone like Olivia Hart." And then, of course, there was Rebecca Stone. The gossip columnist who lived for scandal, who saw shadows where others saw silence. She noticed Olivia leaving the office late one night. Too late. She noticed Nate's eyes following her across a crowded room when he thought no one was watching. And Rebecca smiled. Because stories like that sold faster than truth ever could. So they both resisted. Olivia poured herself into her work, leaning on Clara Jennings, her supportive boss, who reminded her she was worth more than she believed. She pushed laughter into her conversations with Sophie, who asked too many questions about her late nights and tired eyes. She worked harder to keep her father from noticing how restless she had become. But every night, when the world fell quiet, Olivia remembered the way Nate looked at her. And it terrified her. Nate, in turn, buried himself in the Brooks empire. He attended endless meetings, sparred with Victor Hale, and nodded through Eleanor Grant's reports. He convinced himself that keeping Olivia at arm's length was mercy. That sparing her from the storm of his world was kindness. But when he sat alone in his penthouse, staring out at the city skyline, all he could hear was her laugh. And he hated himself for it. Because resistance is a lie. The harder they pushed back, the closer the world around them conspired to pull them together. Olivia's quiet strength was the one thing Nate couldn't control. And Nate's haunted eyes were the one thing Olivia couldn't ignore. Every word unspoken became heavier. Every stolen glance became sharper. Every silence became unbearable. And deep down, they both knew the truth. This wasn't ending. This wasn't disappearing. This wasn't going away. But neither of them was ready to face it. So they resisted. And in their resistance, they made room for the cracks. Cracks that Victor Hale could exploit. Cracks that Victoria Steele could widen. Cracks that Rebecca Stone could expose to the world. Because love denied doesn't fade. It festers. And when it festers, it explodes. And for Nathaniel Brooks and Olivia Hart, that explosion was coming. Soon. They thought resisting each other would protect them. But what they didn't know, was that the real danger wasn't in falling. It was in denying the fall. They had resisted. They had fought it. They had denied themselves, denied each other, denied what everyone else could already see. But silence only holds so long. And every storm, eventually breaks. Nathaniel Brooks thought he had his control back. He threw himself deeper into Brooks Enterprises, sharpening his focus, silencing his emotions. Victor Hale pushed hard on the board, questioning Nate's strategies, undermining his leadership, waiting for cracks to show. But Nate answered with cold precision, with the ruthless edge that had made him CEO in the first place. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Inside, he was unraveling. Because no matter how many deals he closed, no matter how many meetings he buried himself in, Olivia Hart's face haunted him. And it wasn't just her smile. It was her quiet strength. The way she carried herself, unshaken in a world designed to break people like her. That haunted him more than he wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Olivia was breaking in her own way. She tried to convince Clara Jennings, her supportive boss, that she was fine. That she was focused, dedicated, determined to keep her career safe. But Clara wasn't blind. "You're distracted, Olivia," Clara told her one afternoon. "Whatever this is, you need to decide. Because in this world, people like us don't get second chances." Olivia swallowed hard, but she nodded. Because Clara was right. And yet, when she went home at night, Sophie Hart, her younger sister, noticed the shift too. "You're in love with him, aren't you?" Sophie blurted out one evening. Olivia froze. "What? No. Don't be ridiculous." But Sophie just smiled knowingly. Because sisters always know. And Henry Hart, their father, working class and weary, could see the weight on Olivia's shoulders. "You remind me of your mother," he told her gently. "Strong on the outside. Carrying too much on the inside. Don't let the world harden you, Liv." Olivia wanted to believe she wasn't. But the truth was already eating at her. Then came the spark. The night everything cracked open. It happened at another gala, because in Nate's world, every war was fought under chandeliers. Rebecca Stone, the gossip columnist, was there. Watching. Waiting. And so was Victoria Steele, Nate's ambitious ex, wrapped around him like she still owned him. Jonathan Pierce hovered nearby, whispering to Margaret Brooks about stability, legacy, the kind of partner Nate needed. And Olivia. Olivia had no choice but to be there. Clara insisted she attend. A chance to network. To grow. To prove herself. But the moment Nate saw her across the ballroom, the fragile calm he had built shattered. Victoria leaned in close, her hand gripping his arm. "You should smile, darling. People are watching." But Nate wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on Olivia. And Olivia tried to look anywhere but at him. But Rebecca Stone noticed. She saw the way the air changed. The way Nate's mask cracked. And her smile widened, because this was the story she had been waiting for. Then came the breaking point. Victor Hale approached Olivia near the edge of the ballroom, his tone laced with mockery. "Ah, Miss Hart. I've heard so much about you. Quite the distraction you've become." Olivia stiffened. "Excuse me." Victor smirked. "Careful, Miss Hart. Men like Nathaniel Brooks don't have room for charity cases. Not when the board is watching. The words cut deeper than Olivia wanted to admit. Because part of her feared he was right. But before she could respond, Nate appeared. His voice low. Dangerous. That's enough, Victor. The entire room stilled. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Jonathan Pierce's lips curved in satisfaction. Rebecca Stone leaned in closer, recording every detail in her mind. And Olivia? She froze. Because Nate wasn't supposed to care. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. But he did. Later that night, in the shadows of the Brooks Tower, it all came undone. Olivia confronted him first. You can't do that, she said, her voice trembling. You can't defend me like that. Not in front of them. Do you have any idea what that means for me? For you? Nate's jaw clenched. Do you think I care what they think? You should. Olivia shot back. You have an empire to protect. A family name. And me? I'm no one in their world. Just a girl who doesn't belong. Nate's voice dropped, rawer than she had ever heard it. Don't you dare say you're no one. Silence. The kind of silence that was louder than any words. Because in that moment, every wall they had built collapsed. But fear is stronger than desire. Olivia stepped back. Her voice barely above a whisper. This can't happen, Nate. It'll ruin you. It'll ruin me. Nate's eyes burned with conflict. For a heartbeat, he wanted to fight. To tell her she was wrong. But then he remembered his father's words. His mother's expectations. The weight of a legacy he couldn't escape. And so he said nothing. And silence broke them both. From that night forward, everything spiraled. Olivia avoided him, burying herself in work. But gossip swirled, Rebecca Stone feeding the fire, whispers growing louder with each passing day. Nate grew colder, sharper, almost cruel in his silence. Miles Anderson, his loyal assistant, noticed it. Sir, if I may, whatever this is, it's affecting you. It's affecting the company. But Nate brushed him off. Because admitting it meant surrender. And Victoria Steele, sensing weakness, pressed harder. You'll never survive with her. Not in this world. But me? I know how to protect you. Jonathan Pierce added his weight too, cornering Margaret Brooks. He's reckless. Sentimental. Someone needs to rein him in. And Victor Hale? He circled like a predator, waiting for the moment Nate would finally fall. Meanwhile, Olivia leaned on Amelia Ward, her brutally honest best friend. You're miserable, Amelia told her flatly. And don't give me that speech about protecting him. He doesn't need protecting. You do. But Olivia shook her head. You don't understand. I can't be the reason his world collapses. Amelia sighed. Then tell me this, Liv. Are you protecting him? Or are you just afraid to admit you've already fallen? The question lingered long after Amelia left. And Olivia hated the answer. Because the truth was simple. They were already past the point of no return. Every denial. Every silence. Every attempt to resist. It hadn't saved them. It had only brought them here. To the breaking point. And as storms gathered outside their glass towers, Nate Brooks and Olivia Hart both knew. The next move they made would decide everything. Not just their love. Not just their futures. But the empire, the legacy, the very worlds they both belonged to. And neither of them was ready for what came next. Because the breaking point wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. When the storm breaks, it doesn't vanish. It leaves wreckage. And sometimes, the silence after is worse than the thunder itself. That's where Nathaniel Brooks and Olivia Hart found themselves. Not in love's fire, but in its ashes. Nate woke the next morning in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling like it was a battlefield map. He told himself it was better this way. That the silence he chose, the distance he forced, was protection. But when his mother, Margaret Brooks, visited that afternoon, her eyes saw through him. "You look just like your father after a war," she whispered, pouring him tea. But David never understood, victory means nothing if you lose yourself. Nate didn't answer. Because in his silence, his mother's truth burned too close. Across town, Olivia dragged herself into Clara Jennings' office. She expected lectures, but Clara surprised her. "Your work is good," Clara said softly. "But your eyes? They're somewhere else. Olivia, don't let their world convince you that you're less than. I've been there. I know how it feels." Olivia nodded, blinking fast. But she said nothing. Because words would betray her heart. And so both of them, Nate in his tower, Olivia in her quiet office, tried to bury the storm. But storms don't stay buried. That's when Rebecca Stone struck. Her column hit the city like wildfire. Billionaire Brooks and the Mystery Girl, whispers of scandal beneath the empire's glass towers. Names weren't printed. But descriptions were. Enough for people to guess. Enough for whispers to sharpen into knives. And Victor Hale smiled when he read it. Because for him, this wasn't gossip. This was ammunition. At the next board meeting, he leaned forward, voice laced with poison. "Personal distractions make weak leaders. Are we really willing to risk the future of Brooks Enterprises, for a girl?" Nate's knuckles whitened against the table. But Eleanor Grant, polished PR head, cut in smoothly. "The company's stronger than one man's rumor. Let's not exaggerate." Even so. Nate felt every eye in that room on him. Judging. Questioning. Waiting for him to crack. And Olivia? The fallout hit her harder. At her father Henry's small kitchen table, Sophie waved the newspaper headline, half angry, half thrilled. "Liv, it's you, isn't it? This is about you." Olivia's voice broke as she snapped back, "No, Sophie. It's not. And even if it was, do you know what this means for me? For us?" Henry reached across the table, his work-rough hand covering hers. "Don't let them make you small, Liv. I raised you to walk tall, no matter whose shadow you're standing in." But Olivia couldn't shake the fear. Because the shadow she stood in, was now a target painted on her back. The tension reached its peak when Amelia Ward, her brutally honest best friend, cornered her. "Liv, stop lying to yourself. You're not protecting him. You're just breaking yourself." Olivia swallowed hard. "You don't get it. If I stay, I ruin him. If I go, I ruin me. Where's the choice in that?" Amelia leaned in, her voice low. "Maybe the choice isn't yours to make alone. Maybe you should let him decide what's worth the ruin." The words echoed long after Amelia left. Because Olivia knew, she couldn't keep running. Meanwhile, Nate found himself facing Ryan Matthews, his college best friend. Ryan poured 2 glasses of whiskey in Nate's office, his tone cutting. "You're dying inside, Nate. And for what? To protect a board that would sell your bones for stock value?" Nate clenched his jaw. "It's not that simple." Ryan leaned closer. "It is that simple. You love her. And you're throwing it away. Tell me, when your father's name fades, when this empire turns to dust, what's left? Who's left?" Nate had no answer. Only silence. And silence was destroying him. Then came the breaking scene. At a gala weeks later, another chandelier wore, Rebecca Stone was there again. And this time, she cornered Olivia. Her smile was sugar-coated poison. "Miss Hart, wasn't it?" Care to comment on your relationship with Nathaniel Brooks? Olivia's throat closed. She wanted to run. But cameras were watching. The crowd was listening. And before she could even answer, Nate appeared. His voice was steel. "You'll leave her alone, Rebecca." Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Because this wasn't silence. This was declaration. Rebecca smirked. "So the rumors are true." Nate didn't flinch. "Print what you want. But if you drag her name through the mud, you'll regret it." And in that moment, Olivia's world shifted. Because Nate had chosen. Not silence. Not distance. But her. Of course, the fallout was instant. Victor Hale stormed out of the ballroom, already plotting his next move. Victoria Steele's face twisted with fury, her last chance at Nate slipping away. Jonathan Pierce whispered to Maggie Brooks, "Do you see? He's reckless. Dangerous. He needs guidance." But Maggie only watched her son. And for the first time in years, she saw life in his eyes. Later that night, alone in the Brooks Tower, Olivia faced him. Her voice cracked. "Why did you do that? You've destroyed everything you've worked for." Nate's reply was raw. "Because none of it matters without you." Her tears came fast. "Nate, I don't want to be your ruin." He stepped closer, voice breaking. "You're not my ruin, Olivia. You're the only thing keeping me from falling apart." Silence. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full. Heavy. Alive. And Olivia finally let herself believe what she had been running from. That love wasn't her weakness. It was her strength. The fallout wasn't the end. It was chaos. Scandal. War in the making. But in the center of it all, two broken souls finally found something worth the fight. And for the first time, Nathaniel Brooks and Olivia Hart weren't running anymore. They were standing. Together. The fallout had left scars, raw, jagged, and undeniable. Nate Brooks, the man who once believed control was his fortress, now found himself walking through a world where every certainty had cracked. Olivia Hart had been dragged into storms she never asked for, yet somehow, instead of drowning, she had become his anchor. But anchors can weigh heavy. And love, especially in a world like his, was a battlefield with shifting lines. Because the closer Nate and Olivia drew, the louder the world outside screamed to tear them apart. It began with the silence after chaos. Olivia sat at her father's kitchen table, Sophie perched nearby, fiddling with her phone, trying not to intrude. Henry Hart, worn and weary from years of labor, studied his daughter's face with quiet concern. "You're in deeper than you realize, Liv," he said softly. "Men like Nate Brooks, they don't live in the same world as us. And when their world spills into yours, it doesn't just bruise. It breaks." But Olivia's eyes, steady, unflinching, met his. "I know, Dad. But for the first time in a long time, I feel seen." Her words hung heavy, because they weren't just about Nate. They were about survival, about all the years she had carried too much in silence. Meanwhile, Nate stood at the edge of his father's study, untouched since David Brooks' death. Margaret, Maggie Brooks watched from the doorway, her voice soft but firm. "You're changing, Nathaniel," she said. "And not just because of her. Your father would have wanted this, wanted you to stop running." Nate's hand brushed against an old photograph of his father, and for a fleeting second, the mask of control slipped. In Olivia, he had found something he couldn't buy, couldn't command, something terrifyingly pure. But even purity attracts predators. At Brooks Enterprises, Victor Hale circled like a shark that had tasted blood. "He's distracted," Victor hissed during a boardroom sidebar, his voice dripping with venom. "First it's deals slipping, then it's appearances. And all because of a girl who doesn't belong here." Eleanor Grant, polished and poised, adjusted her glasses, her tone clipped. Careful, Victor. You underestimate the power of perception. If the press believes Olivia Hart is grounding him, not distracting him, it could backfire. Victor smirked. Or I can make sure perception bends my way. And just like that, seeds of sabotage took root. Outside the glass towers, Olivia's world was no less ruthless. Rebecca Stone, the gossip columnist who thrived on scandal, cornered Clara Jennings outside Olivia's office. People are curious, Rebecca whispered with a sly smile. Why her? Why Olivia Hart? Does she really think she can play Cinderella in a kingdom built on wolves? Clara's response was sharp, protective. She doesn't need your approval. And neither does he. But words spread faster than truth, and soon whispers turned into headlines. Still, in the chaos, Nate and Olivia found stolen moments where the noise couldn't reach. A late-night walk through Central Park. Olivia wrapped in his coat, her breath visible in the crisp air. You know this won't be easy, Nate said quietly, his voice more vulnerable than she'd ever heard. Olivia looked up, her gaze steady. I'm not asking for easy, Nate. I'm asking for real. And in that moment, he kissed her, not as the CEO with scars, not as the man the world dissected, but as someone who desperately needed her to believe he was worth the fight. But the world pushed harder. Amelia Ward, Olivia's best friend, sat across from her at their favorite diner, stirring her coffee with frustration. Liv, wake up. You're falling for a man who belongs to headlines, boardrooms, and vultures. Do you know what happens to people who get in the way of men like him? Olivia's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. I do. And I also know what happens to people who spend their whole lives too afraid to try. Amelia sighed, torn between loyalty and fear, knowing her friend was choosing a fire that could either warm her or burn her alive. On the other side, Ryan Matthews confronted Nate over a glass of bourbon at a quiet bar. You're playing with fire, Nate, Ryan said, eyes narrowed. And for once, it's not about business, it's about your heart. You're letting her in, and that means the walls are down. Nate leaned back, tension written in every line of his body. Maybe I'm tired of walls, Ryan. Maybe I'm tired of living a life that looks good on paper but feels empty in reality. Ryan shook his head, but beneath the warning, there was respect. He had never seen Nate fight this hard for anything that wasn't money or power. And yet, the outside world wasn't done testing them. Victoria Steele, Nate's ambitious ex, appeared at a charity gala, gliding across the room like she owned it. Her voice was sweet poison as she leaned close. You really think she can survive this world, Nate? You and I, we were equals. She'll always be a liability. And liabilities get crushed. Nate's jaw tightened, but Olivia, standing nearby, didn't flinch. Instead, she met Victoria's gaze and answered calmly. Funny. I thought love was supposed to be a strength. The room stilled. Victoria's smile faltered. For the first time, Olivia wasn't just surviving Nate's world, she was claiming space within it. But victories in love are rarely without cost. Jonathan Pierce, the family friend turned manipulator, cornered Maggie Brooks at a private dinner. You know this can't last, Margaret. The board won't stand for it. Nate needs stability, not romance. Maggie's reply was sharp, unyielding. Stability is worthless if it comes at the cost of his soul. He's finally breathing again, Jonathan. Don't you dare suffocate him. And though Maggie's words carried steel, Jonathan's threat lingered like smoke. As pressure mounted from every angle, Nate and Olivia found themselves drawn closer, not in spite of the storm, but because of it. Late one night, in the quiet of Nate's penthouse, Olivia traced the scar on his shoulder, the one he never spoke about. Tell me, she whispered. Nate's voice cracked as he finally revealed pieces of the past he had buried, the accident, the loss, the guilt that had built walls around him for years. Olivia didn't look away. She didn't pity. She simply held him, grounding him in a way no boardroom victory ever could. And for the first time, Nate realized love wasn't his weakness. It was his redemption. But outside those walls, enemies sharpened their knives. Victor Hale had already set plans in motion. Rebecca Stone's next headline was ready to detonate. And Jonathan Pierce wasn't done playing God with Nate's future. Yet in that fragile space, where Nate and Olivia's bond deepened, something unshakable was forming. Because sometimes love doesn't survive in spite of the storm. Sometimes, it learns to dance in the middle of it. The deeper their bond grew, the harder the world pushed back. And when the storm finally broke, it didn't come as a whisper. It came as a war. The first blow struck without warning. Rebecca Stone's headline hit the morning papers like shrapnel. CEO Nathaniel Brooks caught in scandal, ordinary woman, extraordinary risk. Photos splashed across every screen, Nate's arm around Olivia, stolen moments twisted into weapons. The story painted her not as strength, but as scandal. Olivia stood frozen in her apartment, Sophie clutching her hand, eyes wide with panic. "Liv, they're tearing you apart," Sophie whispered, scrolling through comments that dripped with cruelty. And for the first time, Olivia's voice cracked. "I knew it would be hard. I didn't know it would be this." Nate's response was fury, raw, uncontrollable. In his office, he slammed the paper down, his knuckles white. "Victor," he muttered, voice like steel. He knew exactly who had fed the wolves. Miles Anderson, ever cautious, spoke carefully. "Sir, the board is restless. Victor's using this. They're calling it a liability issue." A liability. That's what they were calling Olivia. Not a woman. Not a person. A liability. Nate's chest tightened, rage boiling into helplessness. For all his power, he couldn't shield her from the one thing that mattered most, public destruction. But Victor Hale wasn't finished. At the next board meeting, he sharpened his knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor announced smoothly, "we are on the verge of a multi-billion-dollar merger. And our CEO is distracted by personal entanglements. This," he waved the paper, "isn't leadership. It's recklessness." Gasps echoed. Eyes turned. And though Eleanor Grant tried to steady the room with reason, let's not confuse headlines with outcomes, the damage was already done. The board demanded Nate step back. Or step down. That night, Olivia found herself cornered by Victoria Steele at a gala she never wanted to attend. Victoria's smile was polished venom. "You thought love could protect you? Look around, Olivia. They're laughing at you. At him. This is the world I belong to. And it's the world that will crush you." Olivia swallowed hard, her heart pounding. But before she could respond, Nate appeared, tension radiating off him. "Enough, Victoria." His voice was low, dangerous. But Olivia saw it in his eyes, the weight of battles he couldn't win. And that was the moment she realized, he wasn't the only one breaking. She was too. The collapse wasn't a single moment. It was a series of fractures. Amelia Ward pulled Olivia aside, voice sharp with fear. "Liv, you're drowning. You think love will save him? It won't. It'll only destroy you." Ryan Matthews confronted Nate with brutal honesty. "You're losing everything, your company, your reputation, your mother's faith. And for what? For a woman the world refuses to accept. Is she worth the ashes?" Even Maggie Brooks, torn between love for her son and fear for his future, whispered. "Nathaniel, maybe letting her go is the only way to protect her." And Nate, who had faced mergers, rivals, and empires, stood silent. Because for once, he didn't have an answer. But the breaking point came when Jonathan Pierce made his move. He visited Olivia directly, his voice dripping with false kindness. "You're a good woman, Olivia. But you're destroying him. Walk away, and I'll ensure Nate's future remains intact. Stay, and you'll drag him down with you. Olivia's hands shook, but Jonathan pressed harder. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, is let go. Those words cut deeper than any headline. Because in the quiet of her heart, Olivia feared they might be true. Days later, Olivia disappeared. No calls. No messages. Just gone. Nate stormed through her office, finding Clara Jennings shaken. She said she needed space, Clara whispered. That this wasn't the life she wanted to ruin for you. Nate's chest caved. For a man who had built empires, who had mastered control, he had never felt more powerless. He went home to the empty silence of his penthouse. And for the first time since his father's death, he broke, sinking to the floor, fists trembling, memories of Olivia's smile haunting every shadow. Meanwhile, Olivia returned to her father's modest home. She sat on the old couch, her head in her hands. Henry Hart placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice heavy with both love and truth. Liv. I raised you to fight for what you believe in. But I also raised you to know when the fight costs too much. Only you can decide which this is. Her sister Sophie's eyes filled with tears. But Dad, she loves him. Henry nodded slowly. And that's the problem. Love this big, it doesn't come without pain. In Nate's world, Victor Hale moved swiftly. He secured temporary control, positioning himself as the savior of Brooks Enterprises. The press hailed him as decisive, while Nate was painted as reckless, unstable, weak. Eleanor Grant cornered Victor in the hallway, her tone cutting. You think this will last? You think people will forget what you've done? Victor smirked. People don't remember truth, Eleanor. They remember power. And for the first time, it seemed Victor had won. But Nate Brooks wasn't defeated. Not yet. Alone in his office, Ryan Matthews confronted him once more. You've lost her, Nate. You've lost the company. Everything's falling apart. So tell me, what's left? Nate's voice was quiet, broken. Me. Ryan frowned. And who are you without the company? Without her? Nate looked at his reflection in the window. For the first time, he saw not the CEO, not the son, not the scarred survivor, but a man on the edge of collapse. And in that silence, Nate realized, he didn't know the answer. Because collapse isn't just losing what you love. It's losing yourself in the process. And as Nate and Olivia drifted apart, two souls torn by a world too cruel to let them breathe, the storm they had tried to survive had finally won. Or so it seemed. But here's the truth about collapse. It doesn't always mean the end. Sometimes, it's the place where rebirth begins. After collapse comes silence. Nathaniel, Nate Brooks had tasted rock bottom. The board had stripped him of power, the tabloids had feasted on his pain, and even his own walls, built high and impenetrable, had finally crumbled. But sometimes, rock bottom is where you find the ground firm enough to push back up. And redemption? Redemption doesn't arrive as a grand gesture. It arrives in fragments, small choices, courageous stands, quiet moments of truth. It begins with Olivia Hart. She's seated in her modest apartment, hands trembling as she rereads Rebecca Stone's latest article, a venomous piece painting her as nothing more than Nate's scandalous fling. She could walk away. It would be easier, safer. But then her phone buzzes. It's Sophie, her younger sister, her voice bright but shaky. Nate's mom. Mrs. Brooks. She came by. She wanted to see you. Olivia's chest tightens. She remembers Margaret Brooks' eyes, filled with grief, strength, and a plea she never spoke aloud, don't give up on him. And Olivia realizes, maybe redemption isn't just Nate's fight. Maybe it's theirs. Cut to Nate. He's alone in his penthouse. Papers scatter the floor, contracts, termination letters, one of Victor Hale's smug press statements. His reflection stares back from the glass window, hollow, broken. But then, Ryan Matthews shows up. Ryan doesn't knock. He barges in, beer in one hand, frustration in the other. You think this is the end? Nate, this is the moment you stop running. You've spent your whole damn life haunted by your father's ghost, proving yourself to people like Hale, to vultures like Jonathan Pierce, to an ex who only saw your power, not you. Enough. This isn't about business anymore. It's about you. Who you choose to be when the world calls you finished. Nate doesn't reply. He just sinks deeper into the couch. But Ryan sees it, the flicker in his friend's eyes. A spark. The turning point comes in the form of betrayal and loyalty intertwined. Miles Anderson, the loyal assistant, slides a file across Nate's desk. This. Victor's been hiding it. Fraudulent transfers. Offshore accounts. He's been siphoning money for years. You were too busy trying to prove yourself, but I wasn't. I couldn't let it slide. I stayed because I believe in you. For the first time in weeks, Nate sits up. Straightens his tie. Looks less like a fallen man, and more like the leader he was born to be. Meanwhile, Olivia faces her own crucible. Jonathan Pierce corners her at a gala, his smile polished, his tone poisonous. You're holding him back, Olivia. Walk away, and I'll make sure Nate gets everything back. Money. Power. Legacy. Stay, and you both burn. The room spins, but Olivia doesn't falter. You think redemption is bought with conditions? You don't know Nate. And you sure as hell don't know me. Her voice trembles, but it carries. Guests turn. Whispers ripple. For the first time, Olivia steps out of the shadows, no longer the ordinary girl hiding in the corner. She's a force. And so, the comeback begins. Nate storms the boardroom, evidence in hand. Hale sits smugly at the head of the table, Eleanor Grant poised with her polished notes, Jonathan Pierce watching with that sly investor's grin. Nate lays it all out, Victor's fraud, his manipulation, his rot at the company's core. Gasps echo. Eleanor's carefully neutral mask falters. Even Jonathan looks unsettled. Victor sneers. You think this makes you some kind of hero? They'll eat you alive, Brooks. Nate doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Maybe. But I'd rather fall telling the truth than rise living a lie. For a heartbeat, silence reigns. Then Miles slides another file across. Proof. Unshakable. Hale's empire crumbles in front of the very people he sought to control. But redemption isn't only corporate. It's personal. Later, Nate finds himself on the Brooks estate porch, staring at his mother, Margaret. She looks at him, eyes weary but warm. You know, your father, he was brilliant, but he forgot something. He thought legacy was built in boardrooms. It isn't. It's built in hearts. Yours was always bigger than his. That's your gift, Nathaniel. The words cut deep, not as a wound, but as healing. And Nate finally lets go of the ghost of David Brooks. Meanwhile, Olivia returns home to find Sophie pacing, Henry sitting silently at the table. Henry looks up, his rough hands folded. Liv. I was wrong. I thought staying away from his world would protect you. But you've shown me, strength isn't avoiding battles. It's choosing the right ones. And you chose. For the first time, Olivia feels not just Nate's support, but her family's. And that weight she carried, of being not enough, of being too ordinary, begins to lift. The final stroke of redemption arrives when Nate and Olivia face Victoria Steele. She's waiting in the lobby, sharp heels clicking, eyes blazing. You think this little act of defiance will last? Nate, you were mine. And women like her, She gestures toward Olivia, venom in her tone. They don't survive in our world. Nate doesn't flinch. He steps closer. I was never yours, Victoria. Not really. Because love isn't possession. It's choice. And I choose her. Olivia's hand slips into his, steady, sure. For Victoria, it's defeat. For Nate and Olivia, it's clarity. Nate rebuilding, not just his company, but his vision. This time, with transparency, integrity, and a team that believes in him. Olivia thriving, not in luxury, but in purpose. Her quiet strength becoming loud, her voice inspiring others to stand tall. Ryan laughing with Nate over old memories. Amelia teasing Olivia, reminding her she's not just strong, she's loved. Gabe Turner shaking Nate's hand, once a rival, now an ally. And through it all, Margaret Brooks watching her son with quiet pride, Henry Hart finally exhaling with relief, Sophie dreaming bigger than ever before. Redemption doesn't erase the scars. It doesn't silence the whispers of tabloids, or magically mend every broken piece. But it transforms the pain. It gives it meaning. It makes the scars, symbols of survival. And for Nate Brooks and Olivia Hart, redemption isn't just about winning back power. It's about building something unshakable, together. In the end, redemption isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of one worth telling. Every storm eventually ends. And when it does, what's left is not the same world you knew before, it's something rebuilt, scarred, but stronger. For Nathaniel, Nate Brooks and Olivia Hart, the collapse had been total. Careers, reputations, trust, all shattered. But sometimes, resolution doesn't mean putting everything back the way it was. It means choosing what to carry forward, and what to leave behind forever. The air is different, lighter, freer. Gone are the boardroom battles, the headlines dripping with scandal, the suffocating grip of people like Victor Hale and Rebecca Stone. In their place is something quieter, something more human. Nate stands in the garden with his mother, Margaret Maggie Brooks. Her elegance shines even in simplicity, her smile softer now that the worst has passed. You remind me less of your father these days, she says gently, adjusting his tie. Nate tilts his head, curious. Less? Yes, she replies. Because you've stopped trying to be him. For the first time in years, Nate doesn't feel the weight of David Brooks' shadow pressing down on him. Instead, he feels, himself. Meanwhile, Olivia sits across from her father, Henry Hart, at their old kitchen table. The hum of the fridge fills the silence between them. Henry clears his throat. His hands, rough from decades of work, twist together nervously. I thought, when you went into his world, Liv, you'd lose yourself. He pauses, voice breaking. But you didn't. You found yourself. And you showed me I was wrong to doubt you. Olivia reaches for his hand. Dad, I only found strength because I had to. For Sophie. For you. And now, for us all. Henry nods, a tear slipping down, but this time it's not from worry. It's relief. The narrative shifts to the business world. The once intimidating boardroom looks different now. Victor Hale's chair sits empty, his empire exposed, his name reduced to whispers of disgrace. Eleanor Grant, the polished PR head, now directs the company's communications under Nate's leadership. She doesn't look at him with rivalry anymore, but with respect. Miles Anderson sits beside Nate, more than just an assistant now. Trusted, proven, indispensable. And Nate? He doesn't rule with fear or pretense. He leads with clarity. Integrity. Something the Brooks name had forgotten long ago. As he closes the meeting, Nate's words echo softly. This company doesn't exist to protect legacies of the past. It exists to build futures. And we're going to build them, together. The applause is quiet, but genuine. Cut to Olivia in her own world. She's no longer just Clara Jennings' dependable employee. With Clara's support, she's spearheading projects that amplify voices often ignored: working-class families, women with big dreams, communities left behind. Amelia Ward, her best friend, teases her after a presentation. "You realize you just made a room full of executives tear up? You're basically a corporate assassin with empathy." Olivia laughs, embarrassed but glowing. For once, she's not living in someone else's shadow. She's living in her own light. Then comes the quiet resolution of friendships and rivalries. Ryan Matthews clinks a glass with Nate at a rooftop bar. "You finally got your head out of your own misery," he jokes. "Took long enough." Nate chuckles, shaking his head. "Couldn't have done it without you reminding me every 5 minutes." Ryan smirks. "That's what best friends are for. To call you on your crap, then drag you back up when you fall." And then there's Gabe Turner. Once a rival, now standing beside Nate as a partner on a new venture. Their handshake isn't just professional, it's personal. Proof that enemies can become allies when pride is stripped away. But what about the disruptors? Victoria Steele, the ambitious ex, has moved on, but not unscathed. Her obsession cost her more than she gained. Last seen boarding a flight, her future uncertain, she lingers only as a reminder of what love is not. Jonathan Pierce retreats into the background too, his influence diminished. His pressure for a loveless match dissolved in the face of Nate's clarity. And Rebecca Stone? Her gossip columns lose their sting when the people she targeted stand unbroken. Her words no longer define them. The climax of resolution arrives in one powerful scene. Nate and Olivia return to the company's annual gala, not as CEO and outsider, not as scandal and headline, but as equals. The crowd hushes as they walk in, hand in hand. Whispers begin, but this time they don't sting. They fade. Because Nate doesn't let go of her hand. And Olivia doesn't lower her gaze. They move through the room with quiet defiance, their love no longer a secret, no longer a weakness, now, it's their greatest strength. At the podium, Nate addresses the crowd. "There was a time I thought legacy meant power. But I was wrong. Legacy is built in the hearts of the people we stand beside. Tonight, I stand beside someone who taught me that strength isn't hiding your scars. It's sharing them. Olivia, thank you, for choosing to stand with me when I had nothing left." Gasps ripple. A spotlight shifts. And Olivia, flushed but proud, squeezes his hand tighter. For once, she doesn't feel like the ordinary girl in the wrong room. She feels exactly where she belongs. And so, every thread ties together. Maggie Brooks smiles as she watches her son find not just love, but peace. Henry Hart finally rests easy, knowing his daughter is safe, and thriving. Sophie Hart, eyes wide with hope, dreams bigger than ever. Ryan and Amelia toast to new beginnings. Miles and Clara stand proud, having witnessed the transformation firsthand. And Nate and Olivia, they don't just survive the storm. They redefine what comes after. In stories, resolution feels like an ending. But in life, it's something different. It's the quiet after chaos, the rebuilding after ruin, the choice to rise again, scarred, yes, but stronger. The final montage plays. Nate and Olivia walking hand in hand down a quiet street at night, laughter echoing. Maggie placing a photo of David Brooks back on the shelf, but this time, beside a new one of Nate and Olivia. Henry teaching Sophie how to fix something in the yard, his laughter returning. And Olivia looking at Nate, eyes soft, as if she finally knows, ordinary or not, she was always extraordinary. And so, Nathaniel Brooks and Olivia Hart discovered that resolution isn't about the world forgiving you. It's about forgiving yourself. And choosing, every day, to love, despite the scars. As Nathaniel, Nate Brooks stands at the crossroads of his life, he realizes that true wealth isn't measured in boardroom victories or the size of his bank account. It's found in the laughter he shares with Olivia Hart, the ordinary girl who taught him how to love without conditions, how to trust again, and how to embrace the beauty in life's simplest moments. Their journey wasn't easy, filled with stumbles, doubts, and the kind of growth only love can inspire, but it was real, and it changed everything. Olivia, once invisible in a world that seemed too big for her, now shines brightly in Nate's world. Together, they have rewritten the rules of success and happiness, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories are born not in luxury, but in the hearts of those willing to be vulnerable and true. What do you think about Nathaniel and Olivia's journey? Did their love surprise you? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. We'd love to hear your perspective on their story of love and transformation. If this touched your heart, please hit the like button and share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places. And don't forget to subscribe to the Billionaire's Enclave for more stories of love, redemption, and emotional healing that inspire and uplift. Your next favorite story awaits. Join the community and be part of these powerful journeys that celebrate human connection in all its forms. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.